Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk to you about cocaine hippos, or the classical music equivalents thereof. What are cocaine hippos, you may ask? Well, actually, they are a fabulous they're an ecological problem, but they're also a fabulous analogy for much of what we are seeing in the classical music universe today. And so we're going to have a whole new category of recordings, the cocaine hippos. Now, where did this originate? That's a very good question. It's a very interesting question. Some of you may have seen the National Geographic special about them. It turns out that Medellin drug cartel kingpin Pablo Escobar, before his untimely demise, when he was one of the richest men in the world, built a palatial estate for himself. It was really quite the thing. And he even built his own prison when he decided to voluntarily imprison himself. It's a wonderful story. You can look it up on Wikipedia. Anyway, he had, in addition to, everything you could ever ask for, a private zoo. And as part of his private zoo, he imported, how he got him there, I have no idea, 4 hippopotamuses. One of which was named Pepe, the poor thing. They actually had to shoot Pepe eventually. But they had initially four hippopotamuses. And after his death, his estate was left to, just sort of disintegrate for a while. Now it's like an amusement park or something. And I don't know. But at the time, the zoo was left fallow and unmanaged, and they let the hippopotamuses roam around, and they got loose, as you might expect they would, and now they inhabit Colombia. There are probably, they think, around a couple hundred of them. I mean, it's really quite unbelievable how well they've done there. I mean, it's a very similar environment to the one they were used to in Africa, but they have no natural predators and nothing to disturb them. And so while the Colombia government is trying to make some effort to sterilize them or control the population, it looks like the hippopotami are there to stay. And they, as you know, are large, rather unwieldy creatures who can be quite disruptive, not only to their native environments because they defecate in the streams and riverbeds in which they live, but they are also extremely obstreperous, and they can be violent, even deadly, in their interactions with humans, all of which shows a severe disruption of the ecosystem. But the important thing about the cocaine hippos is that they answer that wonderful question, why are they there in the first place? Well, they were there because Pablo Escobar had way too much money to spend, and he did it because he could. That's it. I mean, that's the entire answer. And there is an entire category of releases and recordings and projects and things that exist for exactly the same reason. People talk about how the classical music industry is crumbling and they're always desperate for money. The performers, the artists, nothing's ever enough. The truth is there is far too much money in the classical music industry, and it's not where it ought to be. Like you probably would say, cocaine manufacture and distribution is money not where it ought to be. Well, there's something similar here too going on, because there is tons and tons of money to produce things, to make projects, to do things just because they can, because the funds are there. There is no money in marketing, selling, explaining to people why they should own it, doing something useful and active to create an audience, to create a bigger market. I mean, that's a slight difference there. There's a much different market for like cocaine and for classical music. I mean, they're not even remotely similar. But the whimsical nature, whimsical not in the funny sense, whimsical meaning mere whim, that the nature of that, the randomness, the crazy, almost insane flinging money at things that don't make any sense, boy, is that there. And so we now have the Cocaine Hippo category of recordings. And I have a few examples of them here, of course, because I would really like us to get familiar with something which I'm sure is going to prove a rich mine of musical discussion and debate. So the first sort of and probably largest category of our classical cocaine hippos, I have a couple examples here, are ridiculous projects that as Donald Tovey would have said, insist on the restoration of conditions which ought never to have existed in the first place. I mean, that's usually the province of some kooky period instrument or twisted period instrument thing, but not always. Not always. Here is a wonderful example of such. Brahms cycles played by teeny, 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 tiny chamber forces using the misapplied strictures of the Baroque performance practice movement. I mean, it's a total mental non sequitur. Cognitive disconnect, or whatever you want to call it. It's a mishmash of ideas from various speculative academic things applied to tried and true classics just because they can. And here are two of them. You have the Brahms Symphony Cycle with Adam Fischer, the Danish Chamber Orchestra. Horrible. And then you've got this entire series. This is just a piece of the larger series of Thomas Dausgaard with the Swedish Chamber Orchestra. Why are they both in Scandinavia? What is it with Scandinavian chamber orchestras that requires that they do this sort of thing? But here they are, all this Brahms stuff, and Dausgaard was doing, all other things too, Schubert and Schumann, and all the way up to like Tchaikovsky and stuff, and Bruckner with chamber orchestras. There was Mario Venzago's horrible Bruckner cycle with teeny, teeny chamber forces and no vibrato and the strings and all of this garbage these people are applying to this music just to see what would happen. And it is a symptom. Oh, hello, Finster. Here she is. It is a symptom of the fact that there is far too much money with nowhere to go. People have nothing to do with it. They don't know what it's for. They don't know how to spend it. They don't know what makes the most sense. And so what we get are these wackadoo projects and performances that are just because they can. They are cocaine hippos. They pollute the native classical music environment. They may thrive because they are outwardly similar. They're amenable to the general environment in which hippopotami usually live. But they are harmful. They are worthless. And they are, hippopotamuses aren't worthless. We love the little critters. But these things, they're just clogging up the system. And that's the problem. So that's one category of cocaine hippopotamus. The next category of cocaine hippopotamus is what I call monstrous musicology. Musicology that's out of control. Where there what we mean is, usually it takes the form of writing music that composers never did, so that musicologists can piggyback parasitically on the reputations of the great by supposedly finishing unfinished projects or doing stuff that they were dead, they were gone. It doesn't mean they stopped composing. The most famous, of course, are the various versions that have popped up of Beethoven's 10th Symphony. Most recently, the AI version of Beethoven's 10th Symphony. He never wrote it. He never wrote it at all. And so people have done these theoretical reconstruction things, and they never sound particularly like Beethoven. And to the extent they do, they sound like copies of things that Beethoven himself already did and better. And they allow these lonely, lost souls who have some sort of dormant creative impulse to attach themselves to the names of the great and get their 15 minutes of fame. Possibly the most famous and most revolting, in my view, is Anthony Payne's elaboration, they call it. It's an elaboration of Elgar's Third Symphony, which Elgar never wrote. There are some sketches. I mean, some sketches of things here and there. And what he did was he turned it into a big, confabulous symphony that he claims. I mean, he doesn't claim it's by Elgar. Of course not. Why would he want to do that? It's by Anthony Payne, but it's an elaboration of Elgar's sketches. He thereby can absolve himself of responsibility for the actual musical material while claiming responsibility for completing something in the style of the great man himself. And it's just awful. I mean, everything about it is awful. It's so not sounding like Elgar. And even though, orchestrally and whatnot, there are certain sounds that are plausible, bottom line is Elgar didn't write it. And why can't we appreciate the things he did write, which are not anywhere near as popular or well-known as they deserve to be outside of the UK? And I suspect that even inside the UK and outside the little snow globe of the bubble of Elgarians, nobody else cares either. So did we need another symphony by Elgar? I mean, 2 weren't enough? Of course not. I mean, it was just something that was done because he could. It was the result of too much money, too much time on people's hands, and a certain void that Pablo Escobar was able to step into, the distribution and sale of cocaine, and in this case, the sad dearth of major works by Elgar, who only completed a limited number before he kicked the bucket. Well, that's the way it goes, and we have to learn to live with what exists, not with what we fancifully wish might have existed if such and such. So that's the misplaced musicology angle. And there's so much more of that. I mean, it's the Bruckner people, the whole Bruckner 400 scores of the same symphony thing. The constant effort to do new editions. I mean, John Wilson with his Urtext Ravel performances that have tiny little differences here and there, but they are clogging up the arteries. They are damaging our musical ecosystem, even while they frolic rambunctiously in the classical riverbeds, chewing up the vegetation. In other words, your time, your money, your precious hours of listening and all of that stuff. It's all, the ink that gets spilled. It's, my God. I don't mind chewing up my time. I'm having fun. I mean, that's good. As a friend of mine said, if it weren't for incompetence, I wouldn't feel so adequate. And that's true, I think, of most of these things. Anyway, so there's that. And then last but not least, there is what I might call the quantum mechanical cocaine hippo. Yes, there is a quantum mechanical cocaine hippo. This is an aspect of quantum randomness. It's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. You never know what's going to pop out of a back catalog. You could also call this the return of the living dead. An excellent example of that would be a box of something, an artist that nobody cares about, like Carl Seaman, for example. They put out that big box of all of his piano stuff. Somebody who may have been a good accompanist or good at something and whose best work is distributed through all the other boxes, through all the other artists that they work with, but then they get their own box, which has all the same stuff they've already done for all the other artists, plus the few other things they did by themselves, and nobody cares. Well, here's another project that was quantum in its randomness. This series of 8 CD conductor boxes on Deutsche Grammophon, this was the worst of them, the Barenboim box, containing a lot of the worst things he did with the Orchestre de Paris. A couple good things, but his Berlioz, which was horrible, and Franck, which was sludgy, and Wagner orchestral music with the Orchestre de Paris, like we really need to hear that, even though he's a great Wagner conductor. These are projects where those who seem to know very little about the discographies of the artists in question are tasked with assembling a random assortment of things drawn from the back catalog. And of course, this has nothing to do with the fact that there could be other, larger, more comprehensive boxes existing simultaneously. I mean, they're all, if they're not there now, they're coming, right? And so you get these grab bag collections of things that just get tossed out because they can. because they must. They reproduce the way hippos reproduce. It's their natural imperative. They're evolutionarily programmed to make more hippos. Well, the record labels have people working for them, maybe fewer now than before, and if we're lucky, it will be fewer more in the future. And those people have to find things to do. And so they reproduce hippopotamously. They are the cocaine hippos of the record industry, these people who just regurgitate stuff in random samplings and collections and chuck them out there for all of us to look at and scratch our heads and go, don't I already have all that stuff? I mean, why did they pick this instead of that? What's going on there? It's absolutely quantum. And it's randomness. And so those are the three major categories of classical music cocaine hippos. And I hope that you will be joining me as we survey what's going to be very fertile territory. I have no doubt about it. And I really hope that you will also feel free to contribute your own suggestions for recordings that have been issued that belong in the cocaine hippo category. I think that it's going to be one heck of an entertaining batch of suggestions and videos and discussions that we will have about just how there is too much and too many people with too much time on their hands and too much money being spent on things that are completely willful, random, and pointless. Yeah, let's go for it. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.